As the black sedan gently moved into Mr. Desmond's expansive complex, the sun was already turning toward dusk. Mansion. There was a subdued sense of excitement in the air as the workmen assembled, whispered to one another that the Desmond daughters were coming back, returning from overseas, and even though they had only been gone for 2 years, it seemed like forever. Kayama hesitated for a moment before stepping down, tall, graceful and gentle in soul. Moment and took in the aroma of her native country, the arid plains in the distance. Her heart softened when she was reminded that she was home by the hibiscus tree by the gate and the smoke from the cooked supper. The second door behind her opened, and Jessica emerged, her heels striking the floor. The ground abruptly, but she kept her sunglasses on and smirked as she surveyed her surroundings. "Nothing has changed," she replied icily. The same dull spot, laughing and flinging her long locks over her shoulder. Kayama didn't answer, so she grabbed her purse and started to go for her baggage when a young man in his uniform, the gatekeeper, approached them. He had dark brown skin, well-groomed hair, and serene, unreadable eyes. He opened the gate earlier and was back in his place now. Jessica's voice cut like a razor through the air. You there," she yelled at the man. "Yes, Mom, are you blind or just plain slow?" the young man asked her courteously. The young man stood politely but firmly, saying, "Sorry, Mom," she yelled. "Come and carry our bags inside." "It's not my responsibility to carry baggage. Someone from inside will help you." Jessica's eyes widened in shock. I shouted, "Shut up," and she screamed, raising her hand as if she may slap him, and ask, "Are you aware of who I am?" Kayama stepped in immediately. "Jessica, please, I can carry mine. There's no need for all of this." She leaned gently, and as the crew hurried to assist Jessica, they hoisted her bags one by one. "The issue with all of you is that you let these impoverished folks," to hiss loudly, "talk to you as equals." Kayama gave her a weary glance but remained silent. When Kayama entered the house, the staff hurried around them to greet them, and everyone's smile brightened. Missed her because she saw them, not just because she was the more reserved one. Asked the driver how his leg was and thanked him after introducing herself to the cook. Jessica, on the other hand, marched to her to trim the hibiscus tree. Like a queen coming home from battle, she threw her luggage on the bed and yelled for her juice will be served cold while Peter, the gatekeeper, returns. He removed his headgear and went outside to his tiny quarters, where he sat by the wall and observed Peter Evans was the only gatekeeper, and the sky changed hue. The eldest business associate of Mr. Desmond and his son, Mr. Evans, developed a friendship which lasted more than 20 years, during which they founded businesses, traveled the world, and during one peaceful Mr. Evans had spoken that evening in London, "I want our families to be joined. I want one of your daughters will marry Peter." However, Peter, who was smart beyond his years, had asked for something odd, and he responded, "As a gatekeeper, let me enter their house. Now that the test was over, let me see them for who they really are, free from the glitz of wealth and the demands of a name." Started, and the first indication appeared today. The following days went by in silence at the Desmond mansion, where Kayama spent the majority of her spending time indoors, reading novels on the balcony, spending time with her grandma in the yard, and assisting the cook, and the staff loved her in the kitchen when no one was looking, saying she was light in human form and never raised her. Jessica, on the other hand, had returned with a voice that never denigrated anyone. As the self-proclaimed head of the household, she yelled at the employees as if they were animals, accused the cleaner of using her towel, and scolded the gardener for cutting the flowers too short. Her pride prevented her from eating if the meal was not presented on gold-rimmed plates. Choked everyone who came near Peter by filling the house like smoke. He kept his outfit tidy, talked softly, and observed everything from his modest post at the gate. He understood what every day at night. He jotted down notes about the two sisters' personalities in a little brown notebook. He had not yet passed judgment on their heart's behavior, but one afternoon, something about Kayama caused him to pause as Jessica stood by the pool, looking through her phone as the sun rose, and suddenly she said angrily, "Where is that worthless gatekeeper?" After hearing her from his place, Peter approached and said, "You sent for me, Mom?" "Yes, I want you to go to the market," she said. turning to face him with a bored expression. And bring me particular cents, note them down. Peter scowled a little. I'm not. You must send the driver if you're permitted to leave the house, Mom. Jessica blinked as though she hadn't heard right. What just did you say? A hot slap landed across from him before he could finish. I added. His cheek. Do you believe you have the authority to refuse me? You are a gateman, a common nobody, she yelled. Peter remained motionless, unwilling to speak or touch his face, until Kayama arrived. She had heard everything as she ran from the hallway. Jessica! What? She yelled. Is something wrong with you? He treated me disrespectfully, and Jessica cried. He just said he wasn't let to leave the house because he wasn't impolite, Kama retorted, putting himself in front of Peter for protection. Jessica crossed her arms in a passion, saying, How can you slap someone like this? I will not tolerate disrespect from a Kama. A servant in my own home turned to face Peter, who remained still. I'm so sorry, she murmured softly. Please don't mind her. Her face was red from the slap. After staring at her for a while, Peter nodded and said, It's all right, Kayama. He showed no signs of pride or cruelty. His name sounded different as he spoke it, cautiously and softly, as if it were important. Kayama arrived at the gate in silence in the evening when the sun had set, brought him a drink of water and sat on. Are you okay? Asked the little stool next to him. She said. Peter contributed a little. They looked at each other and she whispered, Smile, I've seen worse. You didn't deserve that. There was only silence and something lovely. No music playing, no momentous occasion. Starting to develop between them that night, Peter was unable to sleep and kept staring at the stars through his room's little window while reflecting on the girl who defended him and the other one who unjustly smacked him. His test was functioning, but his heart was starting to feel something he hadn't anticipated, which was risky. After that night, Kama and Peter's relationship changed. Although it wasn't, it was unexpected and loud. Like a little wind that gradually turned into a warm. Kama discovered a reason to stop by every evening, a wind that was invisible but profoundly felt. The gate, sometimes to deliver a glass of juice to Peter, and other times she just watched the birds perch in the branches as they stood close to him. And Peter, though always he opened out about the weather and the condition of the facility, brought back memories of his father's country home and the tranquility of the evenings when the din of the Kayama listened as the mansion faded, smiling. But she didn't yet know who he really was, but something about him made her feel secure, and his words soothed her. He didn't see her as Mr. Desmond's daughter or as a wealthy woman, but rather as she handed him a book one afternoon saying, I thought you might enjoy reading. Shyly Peter examined the cover. It was a straightforward book, one of those tales about, You read this? He questioned, startled, and Kayama chuckled. Love and village life. I read all the stories gently, and they gave me a sense of relief from the day they shared books. At times they talked about the characters. At other times they simply sat quietly next to each other when the gate was open. Evening breeze between them. Yet at that time, their silent companionship blossomed as Jessica was secretly furious because she had observed the fleeting glances. Kiyamama loathed the way she smiled and stopped rushing into the home. How could her younger sister, who was meant to be quiet and unassuming, be the one attracting a man's attention? One morning, if he was only a gatekeeper, she barged into their Daddy, she responded firmly, her arms clasped across her breast. Father's study. Mr. Desmond looked up from his papers, and sure enough, Jessica, it's Kayama. She's making us seem foolish. Mr. What do you mean that she's getting too close to that? Desmond scowled. I've observed the gatekeeper sitting with him, offering him beverages, and conversing like Mr. Desmond leaned back in his chair and gazed at his daughter, demonstrating their equality. What if someone sees Jessica? What if the media finds out? Jessica's voice increased. Do you realize how that would make us appear to be, that's enough? Mr. Jessica winced but refused to back down when Desmond continued. Call your sister for me, he added softly a few minutes later. With her hands softly crossed in front of her, Kayama stood before him and said, Sit you. She obeyed when Mr. Desmond instructed. Down. I heard about you in the gatekeeper, he continued. She started by nodding. Yes, father, we are friends. Mr. Desmond's tone was composed, but so, What makes you want to be close to someone who is so much lower in rank than you are? Desmond's daughter, you are wealthy, attractive, and dignified. Kayama slowly lifted her gaze. And I too had a loving father. He was. I've observed him, and I am aware that he is not wealthy, despite what some may think. Is considerate and respectful of others. He doesn't yell or act as though he hears me. Her father reiterated. I like him and I don't want to impress you. She said, I love him, and Mr. Desmond glanced at her. I'm not ashamed. Looking for indications of bewilderment, but at last he found only quiet strength. I may not agree with you, but I won't argue with you since you are my daughter, Kayama. I swear that night if this causes you any pain, don't keep it from me. Kayama told Peter everything she had discussed with her father when they first met at his job. Peter listened quietly and inwardly to her sister's revelation of her anxieties. He was falling the days that she had passed another test, but now it wasn't just a test anymore. Seemed different. In fact, the breeze brought a certain warmth that had not previously been before Kayama and Peter, where they were creating something tangible rather than merely exchanging books and silent looks. Despite not being expressed, it was sensed in every look, every pause, and every time their Peter's hands nearly touched, yet he always carried a great weight in his chest. He was reminded of who he was when Kayama sat next to him and offered him water with her own hands or laughed at one of his jokes. Was actually Peter Evans, the millionaire Mr. Evans' son, rather than a gatekeeper. He had fallen in love with her, but this wasn't just a test anymore. His heart had crossed a perilous line. Desmond glanced at Peter and Kayama for a while before responding. I knew, he finally said slowly to Jessica. But not all of it, Mr. Evans. Shared it with me after Peter had started, asking for a chance to view more than just your appearance. Cameras and visitors. But who you are when you're alone and thinking, since no one is observing Jessica's face burn. Do you all believe that I failed? Her mother added softly from the corner that no one needed to say this. You demonstrated that yourself when a tear fell down Jessica's cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. Rather, it was the type that resulted from embarrassment. Peter moved forward, and his voice was kind, yet his presence permeated the space. I didn't come to embarrass anyone. Discover the truth. I was brought up to believe that money and beauty are nothing if the heart is frigid, and I never thought I'd find someone like Kayama to experience my emotions, but she reminded me that love isn't found in large spaces. Rather, it's discovered in the way you listen, respect others, and show concern when no one else is. As he turned to face Kayama, the room dimmed and she could only see him. Kayama, I was going to be honest with you. I had intended to do so after today. But now that everyone is aware, let me clarify that I am more than just Peter the gatekeeper. My father is Peter Evans. I'm a billionaire. I run businesses and I fly airplanes, but none of that matters if I don't have you in my arms. I don't care who you are, she whispered. I saw you when no one else did. You may be a commoner or a king. Wanted to look, and I was enthralled with what I saw. The hall erupted in quiet whispers. After several visitors averted their gazes out of remorse, Mr. Evans took the stage once more. Our friendship has endured through the seasons, Desmond told his longtime friend. He took Kayama's hand and placed it in Peter's, sealing it forever on this day. He stood slowly, his voice low, and added, With your permission, I would be honored to call her my daughter, Mr. Desmond. However, you already have my approval and pride. So he turned to Kayama. Honored this family. Kayama grinned while crying, and Jessica turned with her face flushed with embarrassment. She tightened her hands and prepared to reveal a fraud, but rather she had shown herself. Peter and Kayama were no longer in the middle of the hall when the background music started to fade. A wealthy girl and a guard, but two hearts that had connected without titles or falsehoods, and everyone's success wasn't due to wealth, but love caused the sun to rise gradually over the Desmond home, illuminating the courtyard. 1 week had passed since the anniversary and 1 week since the revelation of the truth, but the fallout from that revelation was still reverberating. Kayama stood in front of her bedroom mirror, her heart at ease. Like quiet water, she had a gentle grin on her face without any makeup. Never wavered in her belief in kindness, even when her sister made fun of her and her decisions were questioned. Now the knock on the door revealed that truth had honored her in a way she had never anticipated. She said, "Come in." Her mother came in with a white box that arrived. "For you," she whispered, setting it delicately on the table, and Kayama slowly opened it. Included a pair of beautiful gold earrings and a handwritten message that said, "You saw me when the world saw a uniform. If you have room in your heart, you heard me as the world passed." Kayama grinned and covered her mouth with her hands. "Will you be my wife?" Peter didn't want a big ceremony, and Kayama didn't want a big event, thus the wedding was quiet but lovely. Alternatively, they decided to have it at the same compound where their story started. The gate where Peter used to stand every morning was now decorated with rose petals and white ribbons, and guests were seated in white chairs. Set up beneath the towering trees, the sky was clear, and the birds came back singing. Their consent, Mr. Desmond and Mr. Evans stood side by side, observing with in the first row. Pride workers from the housekeepers, chefs, and elderly gardener were all well-groomed. As they saw the love blossom and be cemented, Jessica sat quietly she wore a plain gray dress back then, not because she was short on color, but nevertheless, when Kayama walked down the aisle in a simple yet magnificent gown, her heart was still learning how to let go of pride. Peter's eyes were fixed on her while everyone stood there, and all the disguises suddenly when they arrived at the altar, all of the anxiety and stress subsided. "From the day you stood up for me, I knew," Peter would hold her hands tenderly but firmly. Stated, "I would never want anyone else by my side, and you have been composed ever since you insulted Kayama." The officer said, "I knew you were a man of strength, not just status." Laughed, "Then before these witnesses I pronounce you husband and wife." Jessica even clapped as the cheers swept across the air like rain after drought. With tears in her eyes, she felt something change for the first time in her life. Later that night, Peter stood next to Peter, who seemed envious rather than resentful. "Right here," Kayama remarked, gazing at the stars, "is where it all started. I'm opening the gate, and you're passing by gracefully." Kayama rested on his shoulder, and this is the point at which their narrative begins. Simplicity from reality, from silent displays of moral behavior when no one was looking, and ultimately unadulterated love, not money, was what united them. Without coercion or shame, welcome champions. I hope you found our stories entertaining. Please hit using the like button, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below. "Try it, I need an honest opinion," she said. The world around them dimmed as they laughed together and he remarked gently, "You just might open your own bakery soon." Peter then became solemn and said, "Kayama," starting slowly, "have you ever thought if I was not who I appeared to be?" She glanced at him and he paused, as if would you still speak to me the way she didn't if I weren't a gatekeeper? "I wouldn't hesitate to speak with you in the same way because the title isn't what matters to me," is that Peter briefly averted his eyes due to being overwhelmed. He whispered, "I've never met someone like you, and I've never met anyone like you." She returned the whisper, and they sat quietly once more as they watched the sky change from blue to gray, although Jessica's research is conducted somewhere outside the mansion's boundaries. Was moving, the call she placed had already been answered by a man who had previously worked for Mr. Evans, and the reality was starting to awaken from slumber like a secret back at home. Mr. Desmond gazed for a while at a photo frame on his desk. Peter is still shaking his hands after a business trip with him years ago. I wonder what the small boy in the backdrop said as he picked up the picture. Evans gazed out the window at his daughter and said, "If this was your plan all along." The Desmond mansion was glowing, as was the Guardian, or perhaps this was just fate. Decorators moved in as part of the preparations for Mr. and Mrs. Desmond's upcoming 30-year wedding anniversary. Invitations had been sent, and the courtyard was adorned with white roses and gold ribbons. Inviting family friends, business associates, and dignitaries from all over the world to the everything appeared ideal from the outside, but inside those stately walls, something what was happening was delicate and hazardous. Jessica had gotten a communication from the she sat on her bed and browsed through the man she had hired to look into Peter. He emailed her some photos, and one of them showed a younger Peter Evans standing, and her eyes froze. Another image of Peter at a business was taken next to Mr. Evans in a luxury vehicle store. The last one in London depicted him entering the Desmond compound. I knew Jessica's heart was racing since she was wearing the identical gatekeeper outfit. Murmured, "He's a fraud," and abruptly sprang to her feet, her head spinning with plans. She might have approached her father directly, but instead she required everyone to. When she saw this, she needed Kiama to feel embarrassed in front of all of their guests. She grinned bitterly to herself. Her stage would be her anniversary, and Peter was unaware that his cover was breaking. Kiama observed him from the balcony while she was occupied assisting the complex workers in hanging lanterns at the entrance. Heartwarming. He worked quietly and never seemed to be seeking recognition. Showed respect for everyone and even gave the young children some candy that night when no one else was there. Discovered him wiping perspiration off his brow beside the flower bed and said, "You're working so hard. I want everything to be perfect on your parents' special day," she whispered quietly, and he grinned. "Peter, will you be there?" Kiama asked, pausing. He looked down at his hands and said, "I don't know if they'd party." She nodded. "Yes. I want you there," she replied, "so that I can have you as my guest, Peter." The panic in his chest temporarily vanished as he met her eyes, saying, "I'll be there," he murmured, but he knew deep down that he couldn't maintain the secrecy for much longer. The home was gleaming as the anniversary day arrived like a brilliant sunrise. The air scented as the guests poured in, men in crisp suits and women in glittering gowns. Of festivity and perfume, Kiama wore a flowing blue gown that gave her a gentle hug. As she scanned the audience, her hair, which was packed in curls, moved with every stride. Peter silently and undetectedly strolled in wearing a sharp black suit. Mr. Evans watched everything with a tranquil expression, like a guy waiting for the proper opportunity. Jessica stood close to the stage, her eyes piercing and her lips painted red. She carried a brown. Jessica moved next to Mr. Desmond while he spoke, holding an envelope. "Turn before you start," she yelled. "I have something crucial to show everyone." As she displayed the picture of Peter and his father in London, the audience turned. All of the guests gasped, and they all gazed up at Peter Kiama. Jessica grinned proudly while Mr. Desmond's expression remained frozen and unreadable. But Mr. Evans moved forward before anyone could say anything. "Yes," he murmured in with a composed tone, "it's true that my son Peter has been living here in disguise. Because we agreed years ago that our children would get married, so I asked him to from good-hearted families." He glanced at Kiama before turning back to the audience, saying, "And only one of your daughters passed the test." The room was suddenly quiet. All of the guests, friends and business partners sat frozen, their eyes jumping between them, since it was so sharp that it could cut glass. No one, not even the birds, spoke about Peter, Mr. Evans and the Desmond family. Jessica's smile dimmed as she appeared to stop chirping while sitting on the balcony earlier. Slowly, she hadn't anticipated this serene reality or this strong quiet. "You knew," she stammered, turning to face her father. "You planned this." One evening, Peter and his father sat together, and she loved him, or the version of him she believed he was. In a peaceful area of their property, Mr. Evans had arrived in town for a short time, and Peter remarked softly, "I think she's the one," and requested a meeting outside of Mr. Desmond's home. "She's different from her sister, is good-hearted, respects everyone equally, and doesn't care about wealth or influence." Mr. Evans glanced at his. "And are you still testing her or testing yourself?" His gaze calmed. "The issue is that I can't even detect the difference because." Peter lowered his eyes. His father put his hand on his shoulder again and tested her again, but let her experience the kind of richness she could have without realizing it was from you, both with words and with life. Peter gave it a lot of thinking that night and came up with a solution a few days later. A stranger called Kiama and said, "Hello, is this Miss Kiama Desmond?" A gentlewoman said, "Yes, it is." "Who's talking?" "You were chosen and invited to a private, opulent retreat. You won't be charged for our guest trial. All costs are covered." "We only ask that." Kiama was perplexed and said, "I didn't sign up for anything. You come and enjoy." The TA woman chuckled softly as someone who respects you submitted your name. reluctantly accepted, and 2 days later, a gleaming black vehicle pulled up to the Desmond mansion. Even Jessica frowned as she left the house, asking, "Who's this one coming to pick you up?" Kiama said, "I don't know. To be honest, the retreat's cuisine and scent were completely different from what she had ever experienced. There was a world of fantasies in the air, with the silk gowns on her bed. And yet her thoughts kept returning to Peter, the smooth way at the gate. That evening, he sat by the candle and uttered her name. "Good evening, Miss Kama." A well-dressed young man came up to her at the pool. He grinned and said, "May I sit?" She nodded. "I've been observing you for a long. I'm from a wealthy family, so I could give you anything you've ever wanted, unlike everyone else I've met." Bowed her head in gratitude, but she said, "I already have everything I need money for." Her eyes gently slid away, "Perhaps not yet, but when I do, they will be filled with love and tranquility. Won't come from expensive outfits or perfume," the man said with a small smile before Standing responded satisfactorily, and was taken home the following day. That evening she sat at the gate with Peter once more and asked, "How was the retreat?" "It was pleasant," he said nonchalantly, "but I missed the tranquility of this location." Peter's heart grew, yet he continued to say he wanted to tell the truth, but not quite yet, not until the globe would have to wait till the masks fell before he could see what he had seen. Was approaching, and Kayama was uncertain since she had never realized her heart could be this full. She couldn't quite put into words how she felt about Peter. It wasn't just friendship anymore. Admiration, or it may have been something more subtle, like a flame that heated without burning, and each time she met his eyes, she questioned whether he felt the same, but not everyone was content, as Jessica observed from afar. Her dignity had been damaged by their father's refusal to discipline Kayama for hanging around with A to her. It was a slight that her quiet younger sister was the one who was suddenly attracting attention from the exact person she had attempted to degrade, who no one had previously noticed. Jessica once again stormed into their father's study one evening and stood by she clenched her jaw and said, "You made a mistake by allowing Kayama to continue." "This nonsense," she said, and Mr. Desmond glanced up wearily at Jessica, with whom she had spoken. "Regarding this," she said, "and you decided to overlook the embarrassment." "She claims to love him," Mr. Desmond said. "She's bringing to our family." Jessica sneered quietly. "She's young and has no idea what she's doing." "Sorry, Jessica. She's not a child, she's blinded by pity, and you know why." Mr. Desmond groaned. "Don't you defend the Desmond name the way you used to?" "Profoundly, because I've begun to question whether it's more about Jessica's heart burned with anger that night," but she remained silent. She called to find out the true identity of the gatekeeper and told a friend in town that she didn't trust him. Felt strange as Peter was polishing the edges and Kayama was sitting by the gate once more. What was the small bag she brought with her when she arrived at the iron gate? He asked, smiling. "Meat hot pie," she said. Peter chuckled quietly. "I made them myself." "You prepared?" He took a taste and nodded.